What was it like going from hunting what is now the biggest typical ever shot in the United States to going into this season, let's say in October?
Coming off of last year with the Huff Buck getting killed, like we walked into this year and there was no mature deer on the property to be seen. So it was just this massive hole left. Obviously nothing was going to come through any of our properties that would meet the standard of that whitetail. But
I never really considered the Huff Buck to be a deer we were going to really have a good chance to kill. I mean, in my mind, you have the killable deer that are using you regularly, and then you have the miracle deer that may or may not come through your property on one day a year or something. Yeah. In the back of my mind, the Huff was never really a possibility. Southwest Ohio and Southeast Indiana got a really bad drought and a ton of EHD, and some of the deers their racks just did not develop like they normally would. So, I mean, we had deer that we thought would be in their prime that we passed up last year that went downhill at 6.5 years of age.
Lights, camera,
follow the trail.
ready to shoot.
If you know where a deer's bedding and you know where he's eating, that deer should be dead.
Camera.
If you're passive on a deer, what you're doing is you're teaching them.
I've got 30 bucks in the Michigan record book. Everyone but one has had at least one previous wound on his body. Some had as many as 4.
The Exodus Podcast,
your source for all things whitetail.
Brad, Tim, this is kind of deja vu. It was almost the same time last year when we were on here, and it was for a different topic. Today's also equally exciting, probably more exciting for you guys in some ways, maybe not. But before we get into everything, take a chance to introduce you guys, yourself.
I'm Brad, just a lifelong whitetail addict. So just love every bit of it, including chasing deer that you never get to kill and managing the land and finding new properties, and just a whitetail addict. Timmy?
Same. I'm probably, this whole thing started all about a deer that I did not kill, that I was just able to get a bunch of video and cameras of. So I'm really good at getting pictures of them, not so good at killing them, but we're working on it. So yeah, just addicted to whitetail, and then love being able to talk to whoever, talk about it to whoever.
Yeah, well, I can empathize with that because sometimes that's a little bit easier than killing the darn things, because as you know, you guys had the Huff Buck, what's known now as the Huff Buck, for multiple years, and obviously piecing everything together, that deer had a giant home range, or not really a home range, I should say, just a giant range in general. And I can't imagine, obviously, that roller coaster in itself, and then the sunsets, life moves on. What was it like going from hunting what is now the biggest typical ever shot in the United States to going into this season, let's say in October? I mean, what does that even look like?
The hardest part, I think, was that, on this particular piece of property, we were seeing some really good mature deer on a consistent basis. And coming off of last year with the Huff Buck getting killed, we walked into this year and there was no mature deer on the property to be seen. So it was just this massive hole left, and I hear deer hunters talk about it. They chase a deer for 3-4 years and they finally kill them, and they're kind of like, man, it's kind of like it's almost a sad situation. You've chased this deer for so long and you've had him in your minds for so long, and then what? And you're looking for that next one. So it was kind of a little bit of a letdown. It was obviously nothing was going to come through any of our properties that would meet the standard of that whitetail. But and unfortunately, on this lease, there was no mature deer. We were left chasing and trying to find them for quite a few months, but it's still work. It's still all fun.
Yeah, for sure. What about you, Brad?
I never really considered the Huff Buck to be a deer we were going to really have a good chance to kill. I mean, in my mind, you have the killable deer that are using you regularly, and then you have the miracle deer that may or may not come through your property on one day a year or something. So in the back of my mind, the Huff was never really a possibility, but it's part of the adventure, trying to find the new buck, or you have that crop of 4-year-olds that are making it to 5, or 3s that might be a shooter at 4 or whatever. So I don't know. It's always interesting and high anticipation to see which bucks return, which ones blew up, which ones went downhill, which ones didn't make it that you'll never see again, that were a great 4-year-old, stuff like that. But it's always exciting. New year, new deer. Hopefully new big deer. But
yeah, well, that's something you guys are constantly getting on really solid deer. And I'm curious, is there anything special that you guys are doing, or is it mainly just by volume and just a lot of cameras in different areas? And it's just, to your point, finding the quote unquote killable deer that
Yeah.
you hopefully be able to wrap your tag around it.
Yeah, we just cast a wide net, as wide of a net as we can. So whether it be a 5-acre piece, which we have a really nice one on this year, or I think the largest property we hunt is 102 acres. And then we have all sorts of, 30-acre, 40-acre, 60-acre, 80-acre. I mean, a lot of them are maybe an 80-acre that only has like 10 acres of huntable ground and the rest of it be ag. But yeah, just spread them out and find one that's killable. And a couple of them this year were killable, but the weather wasn't right, wrong wind, couldn't get into it. And a couple of them we did capitalize on this year. So we had I think we had 4 target bucks at the start of the year. We've killed 3 of those, and then we had a couple new ones move in. We killed 1 of those. So we still have 2 on the hit list, but we've killed 4, I think, of the original, something like that. So yeah, some of them with at least 4 years of history, and then other ones, 1 or 2 years passed up on last year and shot this year. Some of them, I don't know, Southwest Ohio and Southeast Indiana got a really bad drought and a ton of EHD, and some of the deers their racks just did not develop like they normally would. So, I mean, we had deer that we thought would be in their prime that we passed up last year that went downhill at 6.5 years of age, which is kind of odd for them to go downhill from, they might have been a 150 last year, and one of them, I think it was probably right around 150 last year at 4.5. Killed him this year at 5.5, and he was 144 or something like that. So, but other ones did grow a little bit.
Did you guys lose a lot of deer too, or?
Yeah, yeah. Well, one poacher got caught, so maybe that'll help for the following years. EHD definitely took a toll on a couple properties really bad, and then some of them, like one of Timmy's main farms that the Huff Buck was on. There's just like no age class of deer out there this year.
What caused that, do you think? Was it just a lot of bucks that got shot last couple of years in that area, or what would you attribute that to?
I think that one was a lot of EHD in that area. Not a lot of good running water. And that was the same thing for one of the Southwest Ohio farms. I think last year, late season, we'd be seeing 12 or 14 bucks in the field at a time. And then this year, we maybe have 4 or 5 decent deer out there. And it's just, I mean, you can drive around in August and see the vultures circling particular areas. All the neighbors are finding them in stock ponds and dried up creek beds, and just not a good situation.
This might be more on the topic of like your land conversation, but I also think having the right neighbors and finding property with the right neighbors, But this particular property where the Huff Buck was on, that very few mature deer were using this year, there was a change in activity around it. There was some horseback riding and people riding ATVs, and so how comfortable is a mature deer going to feel when that's a semi-consistent thing right away? And so, there was a decent deer killed off of it this year, not by me, but by a family member of mine, and so you stick it out, and it's a good enough piece of property that's going to hold a mature deer in it, and you're going to find them eventually. But I think, that was definitely a piece to some kind of exterior things that you couldn't control kind of happened as well. So
yeah, it's just all the things that go into killing a deer and all the randomness that can happen. Like obviously a new neighbor, a new activity, and there's a lot of randomness in the world of whitetails, and that's where when it all comes together, it feels pretty darn good, which you guys both had that happen this past year, and also multiple times for Brad. I know we stayed in touch here a little bit throughout the season. It has to feel pretty good, right? Sitting here December 19th.
It does feel good. It does feel good. So, it started off the year in Wyoming, killed an elk, and then come back Indiana, killed that one November 8th, and then killed my Ohio buck yesterday. So, yeah.
And then Tim, you whacked a good one too.
Yeah, I unfortunately had a miscue happen in November in Indiana where I missed a big one on a surprise kind of far in the late kind of decision to go into a new place and hang and hunt, and had the chance to shoot a big one there. Hit a limb with the bow, so that was frustrating. Passed a bunch of decent deer, and then a new property. I bought in on a property that Brad had with a couple of guys, and had the chance to get out there. I hunted it 3 times. It's on that 2.5-hour distance, and so you've got to time up your hunts pretty well. You got to look at the cold front. You got to play the cards right. And I killed one. It was November 28th, maybe something like that.
Awesome. Well, here's a question I have just out of curiosity. So you guys hunt Indiana and Ohio, both 1 buck states. I mean, what's your favorite amongst the two? I mean, obviously, but I assume Ohio almost has more pros than cons with how their season is structured versus
Oh, yeah.
Indiana. But maybe I'd just be happy to hear your thoughts on both of them, both states.
Yeah, Ohio is a bow hunter's paradise for
Mhm.
whitetail. I mean, you got the gun season, which is after the rut, kind of between the two ruts, if you include like the second wave of all the does that didn't get bred the first time around. So that gun season is right in that 1 week window. And Ohio, you can hunt from the end of September all the way through February, and it seems like it only gets better the later in the year it gets. So
Mhm.
yeah, we kill a lot of our best deer in January.
Well, how are you usually setting up on those deer in January? Soybeans, corn.
Standing beans. Yep. Yellow acorns. They start to fall a lot, but no, yeah, a lot of standing beans. And if we have a decent corn crop, I mean, a lot of times we'll mix in some corn with our beans. So that worked really well in Indiana last year. Didn't work out so great this year, but standing beans is just a heck of a draw. So it's nice to climb up in the stand at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and you can see just a parade of, 10 to 15 bucks and 20 something does all in the food plot, sitting there eating your beans. It's nice. You can sleep in, go out, see a ton of deer, see every deer in the
Slip
county.
out.
It seems like
Yeah.
get out of there. Yeah.
So someone right now is listening and they're thinking, well, I don't have that this year, but I want to have great late season food next year. Tee it up, maybe explain how that particular field that you're referring to is set up in terms of access. How big is it? Are you having any other sort of green food sources in there? Just paint that picture of what it looks like.
We have all sorts of different food plots. So Indiana, the way that their seasons lay out, I always say, Indiana season's over when the rut starts, just because it's, basically 3 weekends, two weeks of rifle season right in the center of the rut. And then you have like 5 days off, and then you have muzzleloader for whatever it is, 10 days or something. It's just a mess. But Ohio, to answer your question, so we'll have our biggest plot is about 4 acres, 4 to 5 acres, something like that. And we'll do beans in the center of it where it gets the most light. And then around the edges, we have clover, bare spots. We'll top dress with some brassicas. And then, yeah, we'll sneak in from the south. So wait for that cold nor'easter to come through, sneak in from the south up into a blind. I prefer blinds because it's nice and toasty and you can get away with a lot, and yeah, slip out after dark or have somebody come get you in the truck or on an ATV or something to get out of there. Because the way that our favorite field is set up, there's bedding to the north and east, and then to the west is a big destination field that's like 100 acres. And then we have I think it's 4.5 acres right between the two. So you can get them crossing through, and they'll stay in our little 4 acre food plot for, till dark usually. And then about dark, they'll go out into the big destination food source. So, I mean, that's like the ideal setup right there.
Are you doing anything to get them within bow range in terms of like a mock scrape in front of the blind, or maybe a different type of food source close to the blind, or is it just a fence?
Not really. I mean, we have some natural breaks in the fence. They timbered it this year. And when they did that, the loggers came in and created nice big openings right through the bedding, basically at our favorite trail. So now it's set up for them to walk out at about, I don't know, they come out of the woods at about 95 yards. And when they're crossing through, they'll usually come to about 40. And then we have like a permanent blind set up, like a man-made permanent blind set up that they'll actually come right underneath sometimes from one little bitty bedding area that they like, one little ridge finger that they bet on a lot. But that's it, this position right there. We don't put the blinds in like the middle of the fields. Some of the crops are harvested by the farmer. This particular one is not. But yeah, we don't really have like a nice redneck or anything that we can put on a trailer to drag out into the middle of the field. That would be really nice. But no, we just have a permanent one set up there it's really easy to access, get in, get out. There's a little tree line, fence line, hedgerow, whatever you want to call it, that we can sneak up behind, come through that, climb right up in it, and we'll be able to climb into the blind with deer in the field. So it makes it really nice.
Yeah, that seems to be a recipe for success. And I think even having that season go a little bit later in Ohio versus even Iowa or even Illinois here, I think we go to the third Sunday in January. I cannot think of how many times that front is just a week late. And you're just like, man, gosh dang it. And so just having that extra week, which we get plenty of time to kill a deer. I'm not complaining about that. But there are times where I'm like, gosh, if we just had one more week.
Yeah, Ohio, you can literally bow hunt 6 months out of the year. So it's incredible. It's really nice.
I think it changes a hunter's perception too. Growing up in the state of Michigan after November 16th, hunting was done. Deer were so pressured. You were if you saw a decent buck after the 16th, you were amazed. And coming to Indiana, still hunting Indiana with such a big gun season right in the middle of the rut, you still felt the pressure as a deer hunter of like, oh man, I better get it done on November 7th or I can't get it done. And going and hunting Ohio, I was really looking forward to like a late season hunt. Like I've been able to go over there and kill a deer on February 5th or something crazy, shooting does, and you're seeing a bunch of them just because the seasons are different. The deer aren't as pressured. It's something special about Ohio, man.
You were just finishing up saying there's something special about hunting Ohio in the late season. And that is such a good point because so many states and for so long after gun season, I mean, yeah, you could get lucky, but if anyone was being real, the best was behind them. But obviously with how things are structured, and if you're able to have some of those food sources that you can hunt late season, that'd be great. I mean, even some of these state land areas leave standing crops too. So if you're listening to this and you're, man, I can't do that. Well, start figuring out where the state leaves food because you might be in the ballgame.
No doubt. I'll speak to our Indiana property here. We left it's a couple acres of beans, and it's just a couple acres. It's not a humongous plot. And I hunted it last night, the last day of muzzleloader season, and saw double-digit deer. A bunch of does came out. Saw a bunch of small bucks, but it's also prior to that we were having some daylight pictures of still some pretty decent deer. And and that's in a state that's hunted really hard with a gun, and it's really hard to get deer to maturity. And there's a bunch of hunters out there trying to knock them down, and we're still seeing them using our property. The property's not big; it's 100 acres, but as long as you hunt it right, don't overpressure it, you leave the food for them. That's like the secret sauce of being able to see them for a long period of time, even in the state of Indiana. That's hunted pretty hard with a gun.
I think that like the Indiana property though that he's talking about, it's almost like you have to train those deer to come in late season too. Because the first year we had plenty of food in there and we didn't really have any late season activity. Then the next year there was more late season activity, and it seems like this year there's even more. So like 3 years later, it's just like a natural progression of more and more deer. Like they remember where to go late season. So, but it seems to be working out.
Yeah, that's interesting. What, in your guys' opinion, what state has more mature bucks per square mile?
Oh gosh, Ohio, a lot more.
Like 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 4 to 1?
Well, it's just the properties that we have, the one that's like 100 acres that Timmy bought into this year. I mean, we have at least 5 bucks on there that we know of that are over at least 4.5 to 7.5.
Wow.
And then our Indiana properties, literally none over 4.5 this year, I think.
Yeah. And seeing them on a consistent basis is significantly less. Like they're way more transient. We have a deer that we have 3 years of history with that we call Muley, and we know by October 14th he's gone. And so it's just different. Where they tolerate zero pressure. It's just a different ballgame.
So I'm stammering here. So in Ohio, do the deer typically stay closer from what you've seen, or are they even more predictable? And I know somewhat Ohio's a big state, so someone's like, well, where I'm at in Ohio, there's none of this. So I respect and understand that, but at least from where you guys are at, are they maybe more predictable?
Yeah, we're Southwest Ohio, and they are very predictable, I would say. And that's, we hunt 4 different counties in Southwest Ohio. And it's pretty much the same on each one of those property. When certain bucks are going to, meander away for a little while during the rut, but it seems like they get back to their summer pattern, their late season pattern, a lot sooner, more predictable than Indiana. Indiana, we have deer that, they'll leave middle of October before the rut, but they might come back in March or they might come back in early January. They're not nearly as predictable. I think a lot of it has to do with the pressure.
Okay.
That's for sure.
Interesting. Oh, well, I would say obviously you guys are infatuated by whitetails and they live rent free in both your brains. So now I would say Brad, we'll start with your first year, then we'll go to Tim, and then finish up with Brad with your second buck. But I named that deer. Would that be fair to name that the Huff Buck Jr., the one you shot with the bow?
He was very similar to him.
Yeah,
he definitely had some very similar characteristics. Little kicker off the same left brow, 6x6 main frame. He's very similar to him. And my brother's like, yeah, he's definitely the genetics, and definitely seen him on the same farm near the same area. Just a few years later. So
the Huff Buck definitely bred some does then in those late season trips. So tell us a little bit about that in terms of history and anything you learned by chasing that deer from start to finish.
Okay. Well, it could be a really long story, or we can shorten it up a little bit. I'll try to do the cliff notes on it. But so that deer, we called him Mo. He has like a mohawk down the back of his neck, and so he's really easy to tell from year to year which one he is. And he had that 6x6 frame last year, I think. So he would move in during the rut, and then if you didn't kill him by rifle season, he was gone. And then I think last year he came back one day, really late season. But he passed on him a couple times last year. This year he showed up and he blew up quite a bit. Last year he was probably like upper 120s as a 6x5. And this year he was a 6x6 in the middle 150s, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So this property is small. It's only got about maybe a 15-acre woodlot to hunt, something like that. And the neighbors do a lot of ATV riding when they hunt. So they'll really hunt opening weekend, and then they'll hunt rifle hard, and they might do another a weekend where they're all in there. They camp out, shoot their guns, ride in on ATVs. And the biggest thing about this one is he had those guys patterned. So whenever they were hunting, he would sit up on this ridge to watch over the ATV trail. And if they were in there hunting, he would not get up at all during the day. So the strategy for him this year was hunt on a Thursday or Friday when they're not in there hunting, and hope that I have the right wind. This year in November, it was just a lot of south winds, very warm, and he was very, very killable on the days that he was moving. We had daylight pictures of him, like early October all the way through November. But we had south winds, a lot of east winds. This property, you could only access it from the south or the east, really. And so we would sit there and get the pictures of him, daylight, walking under the tree stand, and just knowing you can't get in there. You come in there, he's going to smell you. He's going to go the other way. And, you might have the right wind on a weekend, but you knew the neighbors were going to be hunting. And finally, on I don't know, whatever day that was, November 8th, had kind of a okay-ish wind. It had enough north in it to be able to get in there, because I was hunting one little side of a ravine, and he would walk the other side of the ravine. You could see his trail very clearly. He had 4 or 5 big scrapes, and I knew it was going to be a longer shot than I would like to, but it was really the only way to get in there. I actually moved my tree stand about, 20 yards closer to his trail, just so it'd be a little bit more manageable shot. Actually practiced that specific range in my backyard to Timmy's backyard. So I shoot from my back deck into Timmy's back corner of his property. And that just happened to be the trail that he walked in on. But so that particular morning I went in there, had a decent wind, climbed up in the stand. A couple nice little 8-pointers and 10-pointers were running around, cruising very fast, running through the woods, grunting. There was coyotes all over that morning. Shot one coyote, hit him. Another couple coyotes busted me coming right underneath my tree because they're just running through there. And there's like vultures circling the neighbor's property where it could have been an EHD kill, or they might have wounded one, or who knows what. So my anxiety was pretty high, to say the least. But then I heard where I thought he was bedding. I heard it wasn't a grunt, and it wasn't like a regular buck roar. It was just something kind of in between, like a growlish kind of noise. So I hit the antlers together just really quickly and put him back down because he was only, I don't know, maybe 115 yards away. And 10 minutes later, I look up and here he is coming straight towards me, kind of doing a little fake feeding through the woods, looking around to see what he heard. And he came up to the trail that I was hoping he would come through to lead him right to me. And he comes over a little ridge, looks around, doesn't see anything. So he kind of veers off, kind of his normal route that he would normally take. And he stopped at a scrape, one of the scrapes. And I grunted. I probably didn't need to grunt, but he just kind of froze there. I let it rip, hit him last rib-ish. And he ran off maybe 50 yards, stood there, bedded down. And that started my roughly 10-hour wait in the tree stand, just watching him bed there, looking into the wind. I was looking into the wind as he laid there and watched him till dark, snuck out, grabbed Timmy, my brother, and we were thinking we would come back in, check that bed. If he was there, fantastic. If he wasn't, we'd come back in the morning. So came in, checked the arrow. The arrow looked a lot better than we thought.
Because you were filming this too, so you were able to watch. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So you were able to watch the shot.
So yeah, we checked it. Shot looked liver, looked just straight liver, and we came back in later that night. I think that was like 10 or 12 hours after the shot. Went to that first bed. He wasn't in it, so we backed out. That was a long, sleepless night.
Yeah,
I did call a tracking dog to make sure that we found him. We were back in the morning. The dog walked right up to the bed, found his trail. 200 yards later, we were standing over him. So it was nice. It was really, really cool to watch that dog work, though. I mean, it made crazy. What would have been a somewhat challenging track extremely, extremely easy. So the route I thought he would have taken, he definitely did not. He actually walked back towards my stand and then veered off kind of towards where he was bedded. And then, I think it was like on the Onyx tracker, it was maybe 240 yards or I think it was what it was. So, but the unfortunate part of it was the coyotes absolutely decimated him by the time we got there. So, I mean, he might have been dead for 6 hours at most, maybe. And they ate everything all the way up to the front quarters. Back straps were completely gone. Hind quarters were completely gone. I think even some of the front quarters were gone. But so that was unfortunate, kind of anticlimactic. Great that we found the deer, but man, kind of a waste of life to some degree. But I guess that's part of bow hunting.
What I mean, is there any silver linings from that, or anything you can share in terms of shot execution, or would you not shoot that far again? Or I mean, what would you do different? I mean, it's easy to sit back and look now, but maybe someone is going to have a similar opportunity and they're like, well, I don't want this to happen. I mean, you found the deer and everything else, but there's nothing better than when you whack them, you see them fall down, and that is a way better adrenaline rush than what you experience.
Yeah. Such a better feeling. I mean, the only thing, I learned a lot by that deer, like hunting pressure from neighbors. Learned a ton about that one, like how predictable he was based on their pressure. That was pretty crazy. The The shot, yes, it was definitely a little longer than I would have liked, but that property, the way it was set up, I'd love to be able to say I wouldn't take that shot again, but yeah, I'm going to take that shot every time. So, I mean, yeah, shoot out to 100 yards, 80 yards, stuff like that. This shot was nowhere near that far, but a deer could move just as well in a 30-yard shot as they can a 60, 70, 80-yard shot. So, but he was distracted. He had his head and his antlers in the tree, making that scrape. He barely flinched by the time the arrow got there. It's just maybe a little bit. I think my anchor point was a little bit too far back on him. The arrow went where I wanted to, but learned a lot from that deer and hunting pressure from neighbors and stuff like that. But yeah, maybe wait for the perfect wind, even though it never seems like the big bucks move when you have a perfect wind for you versus what the perfect wind for them. So I mean, take what they're going to give you, and that was about the only thing that one was going to give us.
Yeah, that is interesting. It's funny how you mentioned looking at an additional outside factor, and then plus what you know of the deer, and then okay, well now things just got a lot more predictable than not acknowledging that or thinking outside the box.
Yep. But yeah, that made it. The pressure made him predictable in that regard. We have other properties where they're unpressured, and they're all over the place any time of day. This one was concentrated into a very specific area, almost a very specific trail. It was pretty neat.
Did he bed in that particular area on a specific wind often? Or I mean, obviously, there's only so much you can know. But what did you notice on the deer's behavior, and also even looking back to the year prior when you passed him a couple times?
He was always daylight on Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, and whenever the neighbors were hunting, he would not move. Whenever, well, we couldn't necessarily play the wind on him. Like if he moves into certain winds, I don't think that really factored into his movement as much as the pressure did. But ours was access and pressure. You could only access this little area from one or two predictable winds. And I probably wouldn't hunt it in the evening just because the thermals would suck my wind down the little drainage that he bedded towards the end of it. So when he circles around and comes up and plays the thermal wind as he's approaching his food source, I probably wouldn't have been able to hunt that unless I had a strong north wind. So yeah, there's definitely quite a bit learned on that one.
Yeah, that's I'm glad it worked out, and that deer was really impressive. And then Tim, I feel like sometimes I get the impression that you're kind of like the butt of some jokes here. So I was really happy to see you whack a giant.
Listen, they like to make fun of me because I like to shoot deer a lot, and maybe my trigger finger gets a little happy. We'll say
happens.
That. It happens. But yeah, no, it was good to get a good one down this year. Buying into this particular farm and knowing the history, it was a no-brainer. A couple 170s came out of there the first couple of years that they've owned the farm, and then that's Brad's brother had killed a couple of really, really good ones. One triple drop, and just in an area where some giants live, and the neighbors will share, and you kind of like knew, and so it was a no-brainer for me to get in on that property and lift the jinx of me shooting 120s and get out of that category a little bit, and certainly, it was 140 or nothing this year for me. So, kind of like breaking that streak, and we made it happen, and it was pretty fun.
Yeah. So you guys have been on the Land podcast as well and talk. I mean, you guys went. I suggest anyone to go listen to that because you guys go in depth to how you guys structure that, the strategy behind it, and everything else. So when we spoke last time, you had not bought into well, I'll let you explain. So this Ohio farm, that's the first kind of piece of dirt you ended up buying then, or did you own in Indiana as well? I can't remember.
I owned in Indiana with these guys too. So Indiana was the first farm that I bought into. And again, if you were to go back and listen to that, we talk about relationships and partnerships, and you've got to make sure that whoever you're going into, you got to be dialed with them. But this particular farm, there was a piece of property that touched it that came up for sale, or somebody was looking to get rid of. And it's kind of like, Brad and the team here, Joe, Brandon, and Steven, you look to make it as cost effective as possible. And, bringing somebody else in to help buy that particular land that touched it made sense, considering I was already a partner with them over in Indiana, and I'm not shooting the biggest deer on the farm. So they're like, yeah, sure, bring him over, right?
You got 5 more. We need 5 more Tims is what we need.
Yeah, we need a guy who's going to go in there and hunt hard. And, the check clears every week. So, but and it worked out for me. I really wanted to have a piece of ground in Ohio because of just the regulations that happen and how great of a state it is to try to kill a whitetail in. And I certainly felt like it was an absolute no brainer. And going into the year, was there a really high end deer? Brad killed a really good one that was probably scored really sneaky on us. We didn't think he was going to score as big as he did, but there was a handful of deer, but probably no high end 170, 180 type deer, but a bunch of really good 140, 150 type of deer. And and consistently, the area consistently produces them. Neighbors share pictures, everybody's sharing pictures back and forth, and so you know what you're going to get, which is really good hunts on a consistent basis.
Yeah, that is a beautiful thing because going into it the neighborhood. I think to your guys' point earlier, not necessarily knowing all those outside influence. I mean, it kind of worked out where you were able to use them to your advantage so you could predict what that deer was doing, but it had to be a relief to go into that knowing just the general neighborhood and what you'd be able to turnkey start hunting the first year. I mean, that's pretty awesome.
And not a ton of pressure in the area, a little bit, a decent amount, but not a ton. So the deer stayed pretty consistent. The deer that I eventually ended up killing was a new deer to the farm actually this year that I got on it, and it was kind of funny to watch the interaction of some deer. You could almost bet on what deer you were probably going to get a chance to kill. Like this 10 that I ended up killing, and the deer that Brad killed last night. They were never on the farm together. It was almost like a 2-day cycle. And so when you've got a daylight picture, like I knew that the likelihood of me, the night that I went in to hunt, the likelihood of me shooting that 10 was greater than any other deer. Unless you caught them in their time of when they're cycling out and another one's coming out and another one's leaving. But they didn't play together. You could almost play it where like, probably gonna shoot 10 tonight, Brad last night, there's a big 8, mature 8 that's in there, but Kickers is the name of this deer, and I'll let Brad tell that story, but probably going to shoot Kickers tonight. It was pretty predictable of how these mature deer interacted with each other. They were never on this 100-acre piece together. So it was pretty fun to watch and learn, kind of how things unfolded.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people have nailed down the skill set to kill 120. I think there's a lot of people there, and there's less people that are getting to that 140, 150 class. And like I said, everyone can do what they want and achieve their own goals. But going into this year, what was that like? Were you is it a mind over matter? Did you have to tweak what you were trying to do at all?
For a guy like me, it's really hard. Opening day gun season for Indiana, I'm filming a really nice 128-inch 10 with a broken brow tine, and I'm sending like a picture of them, and you got guys like Brad, go ahead and shoot him. They're egging me on to shoot him because they want to continue this thing. But it's really hard for a guy like me. I see that deer and I go, man, I grew up in the great state of Michigan where 100-incher was a giant, and so it's taken me some maturity to get to that point. But it really is like putting your foot down and just saying, ultimately trusting the fact that if you don't shoot this 128-incher, the season's not over. And you're going to get another chance, and starting to live by that, you're going to get one really good chance at a really good deer in each state that you hunt. If you hunt hard enough and you hunt smart enough, you play the winds, you don't go in there. I think I only hunted 3. This is maybe gave that away, but where we
can bleep that. We can bleep that out.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. But it's a big area, right? But this farm that we bought into in Ohio, I only did it 3 times. And it was every time was like, high end intention of like killing a big deer and passing the 120s, finally feeling comfortable enough to pass the 120 because the season's not over if you do. There's plenty of deer and just getting to that mature, it's probably just a maturity thing too,
Mhm.
like calming the nerves a little bit. And, there's nothing better than killing a mature deer. There's nothing better.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think that's just a really fair assessment. To be completely honest, I think it's just drawing the line in the sand and keeping yourself accountable, because it does get tempting. I mean, no matter what that is, even if you're trying to shoot a 160 and a 150 comes by, and if you made your mind up, I mean, you'd probably be a better man than me if you didn't lower your standards. So,
I'm not to that level yet. Like,
well, we have to illustrate the full spectrum. There's levels to all of it. I mean, there's guys that you hear about now, some of these guys that are like in their 50s, and I don't pick up my bow unless the deer's 190 inches. Well, I'm a far cry from that. I can tell you that. But there's levels to it, and no matter where you're at, maybe just acknowledge that and try to go up another peg in the rung. Which, I mean, I respect that. So overall, I mean, that was your best deer then? So you had to feel pretty darn good about it.
Yeah, it's my best deer. I had one really close to it. That was ironically enough, kind of like a happen chance deer, but a really mature deer. But yeah, I was pumped. It was like a no doubt. It was either this deer we called kickers or this 10, and those were the only deer. I had to encounter with a couple of decent bucks on that property that let walk. That maybe in previous years I would have shot. And it's also probably surrounding yourself with some like-minded folks that are helping you out as much as you get teased about being a happy trigger finger guy. It helps you along, and it helps you mature as a hunter. And I finally feel like I'm getting there. We're still working on some things, but we're getting there.
Yeah, you're in the right direction.
It was a really good feeling to put a good one.
That's awesome. I was really happy to see that. Now, I am kind of putting together all these things here. So you killed that deer, and then I assume Mr. Kickers came in, and did he become a little bit more regular?
Yeah, he did. He definitely did. But so this spot, I mean, it's a pretty cool spot. It's one of those bulletproof access spots. So it's you walk almost straight up a hill. You have to like switch back it to get up, and then right on the top is maybe a 1/4 acre clover plot, and then there's just bedding on the other side of it. So you could hunt that spot if you have the right wind. You could hunt it as much as you want. You wouldn't do any damage, put any pressure on the property, but you do have to have the right wind. And gosh, it was so Timmy's, the one I shot this year, kickers, and my brother's triple drop time that he shot out there last year all came out of the same stand, same spot. Just, one moves in there to that little perfect sanctuary and food plot and an area every year. It seems like one takes over, even in the middle of the year when one's gone, another one's going to be in there. It's never like unoccupied. So the no vacancy sign is
that's
very clear.
That's very clear. Very good sign to have on your farm. It's interesting you bring that up, because the difference of just a bulletproof stand and then maybe an okay stand, big difference. Because this year I found a spot that was bulletproof, and I'm like, this is what a good spot feels like. I wish they all felt like this. And so, that's really cool. And to your point, they can be really effective. So, Tim shot that buck, and then this deer ended up becoming a little bit more regular in this area then. And he did. Matter of time.
It's like kickers. He's a mainframe 8. He's got 12.5-inch G2s, and on both G2s, he's got like 3 kickers, and they're palmated off. It's cool deer. Really cool deer. He's really framey, but he was never like, he was almost like a little bit more submissive than some of the other bully bucks, it seemed like. So he wouldn't dominate an area, but if another deer moved out or Timmy shot him, it was almost immediately moving in there. So it was pretty cool to see that. And I think I sent you the pictures from the last 4 years. So he might be 5.5, maybe even 6.5, something like that. So send his teeth in. We'll see what he comes back at. But he was never a real dominant, push other deer out, which is nice to have on there, especially when they're pretty big deer.
Yeah.
He was a cool one. He was a cool one.
Yeah, he had a giant frame. And so Tim was kind of alluding that maybe you guys didn't think he was as big as he was until he got on the ground.
Apparently we're terrible at scoring deer this year. I mean, but we've seen, I think EHD had a lot to do with that. Some of the deer, you see them last year and they look big, framey, They have good mass. And then this year, they would only have mass at the bases. They lost all their mass quickly after the bases. And yeah, the main beams shrunk, the tines shrunk. I mean, even from a deer that should blow up at 5 years, they're going downhill. So just a kind of a poor antler growth year for whatever reason. Mainly the drought is what I would attribute it to, but maybe some EHD touches in there. My dad shot one on the same farm. He was probably a 150 last year as a 9-pointer. And this year he lost mass. He lost main beam length. He gained an additional tine, but even after he killed him, he killed that one, end of October around Halloween or 1st of November, something like that. And his body was so much smaller than he was in the past. And then he looked at his antlers, like the little, I don't know what they're called, like the little bumps that are on their antlers that will kind of get rounded off when they start rubbing and everything. His were all still really pointy. It was like he didn't feel like rubbing at all this year. It was weird. Just a weird, smaller body. Yeah, odd year with body growth and antler growth.
Yeah. Well, I do think sometimes it's easier to overestimate. I don't know. And I think it's getting easier to overestimate and underestimate deer because maybe it's because I look at so many darn deer now, and there's times where the deer gets killed and the neighbor, like, yeah, he taped out to this. And I do trust what they scored it at. I'm like, geez, like if I would have known that, if I would have hunted them a little harder. And then the other one, it's like, that deer's got to be at least 145 inches. And then you tape him and he has 16-inch main beams and he scores 132. Like,
yeah. Yep.
Okay, that makes me feel better. You guys experience that too, because it drives me crazy.
Every deer this year.
Yeah, every deer we've been off this year. Last year, we were right on the money with all of them. And I think the year before, we were right on the money with all of them. But this year, we were over or under on all of them. So Tim's, we were probably 7 inches over, something like that, on what we were putting them at. My deer, we were 12 inches under. We thought he would be, upper 140s, and he's right at 160. So,
the one you shot yesterday or this weekend?
Yep, the one I shot yesterday.
Yeah, I don't know. That doesn't surprise me. That deer looked pretty darn big in the pictures he sent me.
This has a mainframe 8, man. It's tough to put a mainframe 8.
True.
Like that big. Like it's. He was sneaky.
That's very fair. So okay. So that deer, you had multiple years of history, and even you sent over a picture that was the Exodus Trek, September of 2019. What did you learn from having so much history over those years too? I mean, you mentioned he was kind of submissive. I mean, did he live on that farm for the most part?
Oh yeah. Yeah, he was on there all the time. But whenever the rut came around, you really wouldn't see him much. It was like he went in a hole or moved off. You'd see him maybe once or twice to let you know he was in the area, but he wasn't running around like every other buck, running around with a hard on. You'd see him all the time. You'd rattle, all the other bucks would come in. You'd throw out a little grunt. He wouldn't respond to anything. My brother did shoot him 2 years prior on February 4th or something. So that might have had something to do with it.
He was a changed buck from that moment on.
Yeah. We had a broken front foot, broadhead towards his back hip, and did he have any? I think he had one other injury somewhere, but yeah, we haven't even skinned him out yet. We're gonna let him hang for a couple more days, and then we'll skin him out, see if that broadhead's still inside him, see what other damage he's got done to him.
Yeah,
do a little necropsy.
Yeah, that'll be very interesting to see. I mean, well, that's any other specific lessons you learned from that deer that we didn't cover already?
Not too much, other than just, he wasn't going to come to calling. That's for sure. He would travel around with other bucks, sometime like late season and early season, until they kind of kicked him away. But yeah, he wouldn't be on the property when there was a bigger bodied, more mature, more dominant buck, for sure. He would always kind of trickle in after. He'd come in, even when he entered a food plot or something, he kind of enters in timid. Whereas other ones, a big mature buck, sometimes he'll enter into the food plot, posing, strutting, all that stuff. Not him. He kind of walks in, kind of just
low profile.
All right, nobody else is here. all right, it's safe for me to come in there and hang out.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, I mean, congratulations to both of you guys. It's awesome to see you guys have a fantastic year. Let's say someone out here is really, man, I need to kill my buck in January. I mean, we talked about late season food. Do you have any other words of wisdom or advice in terms of being really strategic with your sits, or maybe it's a volume sit with good access? Any advice?
Well, hunt the food between the best bedding. Find the best bedding you can, and the closest food to it. Get close to that bedding, because a lot of times they'll just get up, move a little ways, look around, like work their way towards that feed, wherever that is.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can put a food plot in close to that bedding, where you can get yourself kind of perpendicular to where they're going to move through, and have the right access to it. Access is really, really, really important, more so in the late season or very early season. And that's the way to do it. I mean, it's worked for us, but that might be just the properties that we hunt, but that's the way that we do it. And it seems to be pretty productive.
We were talking about this the other day. I'm still chasing them with a stick and string down here in Indiana, and I have a couple of decent properties to hunt. And you always played it safe during the rut, not wanting to bump a deer. You've got nothing to lose this late in the year now. So if you don't have the food source, or you're trying to hunt them on the way to somebody else's food source, you got to get to that thick stuff. It's kind of like what we were talking about, and not playing it so safe. And that would probably be about the only tip that I have. Try to get that travel corridor late season. They're going to stay in the thick stuff. They're not going to want to be exposed. They've been pressured for so much and not for so long. So I can't wait for Thursday, Friday's cold front. Freeze, but we're still chasing those.
You and me both. So, what's your guys' thoughts on timing cold fronts versus just volume sits of just, I have 2 hours to get out, I'm going to go give it a shot? Do you go do that, or are you trying to be strategic?
If you got a bulletproof set, go for it. You never know. They do seem to hit green. Like if you have a few warm days, especially if they can get up to like in the 50s, and that clover seems to pop again. Although that's what we have, clover and stuff like that. But they'll pop again, and you'll see the deer crush that stuff for a few days during that warm front, or the tail end of that warm front. When that cold front moves through again, they'll still hit it for another day or two. But then, after that cold front, the really, really cold front has been around for a couple of days. That's when they move everything over to grain. So hunt that grain when it's super cold, at least the day 2 or 3 of that cold front. The first super cold day, it doesn't seem like they move all that much, but that second super cold day, it's like it flips a switch on their stomach, and then they know where to go. But plan for next year's late season hunt now. So find those bedding areas and start your plan for what you're going to clear out. Create that little food plot right there between the bedding and the destination food plot. I mean, that's what we're doing right now, is planning where this food plot is going to go. How can we increase the size of this one, or create more bedding over here to get them to move 50 yards in one direction so that we can get a better stand and better access and stuff like that. I mean, that's what we're thinking about right now, and the seasons aren't even over. But we plan everything for late season as opposed to the rut. I mean, the rut, you just find a pinch point and you're good. But the late season hunts that are a lot of our favorite times, we're planning for that. We're planting for that, years in advance.
That's a great point. And I think that ask yourself how to plan for next year in all aspects of the season from start to finish, and make notes of it, and don't look at that notebook, execute against it, because you're going to be in the same position the year after, which I'm sure you guys do that on all of your farms. Well, I really appreciate your guys' time. I would say if you guys want to plug anything you'd like to, or share anything else, you have the floor to do so.
Jimmy?
Okay. Good.
That's true. If you want to see some of the hunts, we'll probably have them up on our YouTube channel. So if you want to check out Chief Outdoors, we'll have some of those deer. You can check out the hunts from last year, and we might have a couple more posted here when we get some time to edit them and post them up there here in the next few weeks. So
awesome.
You can see those here.
Awesome. Well, certainly appreciate it, guys. Tim, good luck the rest of the season. Brad, enjoy your time off here and scout for next year. We'll have to catch up again soon.
Likewise, Jake. Have a good one, man. Good luck.